computer. And I want to introduce to you all again, or reintroduce to all of you again, Kelsey Morris. He comes to us from the University of Missouri. He just beams right in here, and his collaborator, Lisa Powers, they're working together to provide us this deep dive into the district systems fidelity inventory. And we are now on section 7, coaching. And I believe this is a 90-minute session. We have about a half hour to touch base with our teams and then get into the content, however Kelsey wants to work on that. But I'm going to turn this over to you, Kelsey.
All right, thanks so much. I'm excited to be here again with all of you through the magic of technology in our virtual space. And like Tina said, I'm so fortunate to be joined today by my colleague, Dr. Lisa Powers, who's another principal member of our team here at the University of Missouri. And it's exciting to think that out of 9 strands on the DSFI, we find ourselves today at strand 7. So we're going to talk today all about coaching, and we are going to work through several different items that are on the coaching strand, because our ultimate goal, like we've talked before, is to make sure that you feel confident and competent to move forward with your journey of district-wide implementation. So let's take a look at some intentions that we've set for today. So we're going to start off with what we call stars and stairs. This is something that I pulled out of my back pocket from my old district professional development days. And we sent out a resource to all of you because we want to create the opportunity for you to share, for you to highlight the amazing things that are happening in your district. And so we'll take a look at what you prepared. We're going to learn where you feel your district shines. So those are the stars. But then the stairs, thinking, something I got to climb up and over, where are you going next? And so I think the last I checked, I've got stars and stairs from all but maybe one district. And I think it's one of those pesky issues with Google Docs and permission settings between different accounts. So I apologize in advance if I don't have yours integrated into the slideshow today. When I do share the slides with Tina, so that way you guys always have that lasting resource, I'll make sure that if there is a district missing, it for sure gets integrated. But we're going to start with stars and stairs. It's an opportunity for us to hear from you about the amazing things that are happening with your district's journey of district-wide implementation, as well as based upon what you've learned so far with these sessions, where do you think you might need to go next? We're also going to spotlight the new implementation driver of coaching. So we've covered a lot of ground. When we were last together, we talked about workforce capacity and training. So it's still kind of in that realm of how do we get people set up for success? How do we invest in the people we have? And so we find ourselves today with that implementation driver of coaching. And along the way, just like we have been doing, we're going to share content and resources and next steps and ideas and think about all things that you can put in your toolbox and take with you on your journey. So let's start with stars and stairs. We want to know, where does your district shine? Where do you see yourself needing to go next? And so the way we set this up was everything we're doing together across all of these sessions goes back to the implementation drivers we have. And it all is aligned with the district systems fidelity inventory. So I'm going to plant a seed right now. I'm going to make a plug. Before we come to the June session, and Tina will send more specifics about kind of how to take the DSFI timelines, all that stuff. But I kind of want to plant this seed with you now. We've covered so much ground, and now you know a thing about a thing when it comes to district-wide implementation. You're building your skill set. Before we come to our last session in June, carve out time to take the DSFI, really get that temperature check, of all these items that we've covered, where are you now? So that way you've got data to inform your next steps and data to guide your decision making. So kudos to the Trailblazers who are passionate about PBIS. So in a minute, but not yet, we're going to take a look at all those stars and stairs, and we'll work from Blairsville-Saltsburg to Erie to Interboro to Keystone to North Penn to Upper Merion. We're going to work our way all around the great state of Pennsylvania. And the way that we set this up was we want to know your district name. Tell us a little bit about your district, because even though you're all in Pennsylvania, if you're like a lot of districts here in Missouri, you only know your district or a neighboring district. So it's always helpful to kind of know who else is out there in your region doing this work. How large is your district in terms of elementary schools, middle and junior high schools, high schools? And then how long have you been implementing PBIS? And then in terms of stars, we really wanted to know, where do you feel you shine, and what's the explanation you might have of that? And it could be things that are tied directly back to the DSFI. Maybe you feel you shine in leadership teaming or stakeholder engagement. And on the flip side, where do you see the opportunity to elevate the work? Where do you think that your district could benefit by going next? And maybe that's another strand we've covered so far, an implementation driver from the DSFI. So with that being said, we're going to kick it off with Blairsville-Saltsburg. So I'm going to encourage one of the members from the Blairsville-Saltsburg team to unmute themselves, turn your video on. I'll advance the slides for you. You just tell me when you're ready, or I'll use my good psychic radar and kind of listen for those pause points. But we're going to turn it over to Blairsville-Saltsburg.
I am unmuted, but I didn't turn my video on. I am Amy Citroni. I'm the principal at Blairsville Elementary. Our district is a rural district in southern Indiana County. We are, excuse me, comprised currently of 2 campuses, Blairsville being the larger campus, which has an elementary school and then a combined middle high school. At the other end of the district is Saltsburg Elementary School and Saltsburg Middle High School. The Blairsville campus is probably not quite twice the size of the Saltsburg campus in terms of student enrollment. This is our 2nd year of implementation with PBIS. We started, I will say this is my 4th year as a principal in this building. And when we started planning for PBIS, I guess this is one of our stars, is that we have worked closely, and in my prior district, I worked closely with our PBIS representative from the local intermediate unit, who is now our school psychologist, and as I refer to, our behavior and PBIS resident expert in Dr. Lisa Anderson, who has been a driving force behind getting PBIS up and running in our building, and a lot of the planning. That's probably one of the areas where we truly shine, is in terms of planning. We have an enthusiastic team. There are times that we need to go back and look at things, especially in the world of COVID. But one of the things we were able to do was come up with a plan last spring, while everybody was in remote instruction, to continue to emphasize our expected behaviors and acknowledge the students as well as their parents. We included that piece in it. As far as where we need to go next, we have been having our discussions about expanding PBIS across our district. The district is currently in a transition phase of looking at how we are configured. So there may be a lot, if reconfiguration occurs, that would be somewhat like starting over again, but there will also be good pieces with that we'll then have district-wide involvement to work on our tiers 2 and 3 interventions, to work on our stakeholder engagement within the community. We did start to reach out for some of that toward the end of last year. And I think, we've got some good things happening, but our to-do list is probably much greater than the things for which we'll pat ourselves on the back at the moment. And I know Lisa, Dr. Anderson is in this meeting as well. So if she has anything to add, I'll be quiet and let her talk.
Thank you so much, Amy. What a great, what a great presentation of the amazing things that are happening with your teams and in your district. And I love that you turned it over to Dr. Anderson. So Dr. Anderson, anything that you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to thank Amy for taking the reins and going through those slides, because we didn't really decide who was going to do that. I guess we should have been a little more prepared, but she took it and ran with it, and yay. I think that really what's so important for us right now is being involved in this DSFI project and having the opportunity to use that action plan to drive our next steps, and giving ourselves permission to go slow and focus in on each of those different modules and recognize what we need to do one step at a time. So that's really all I wanted to add. I know there's a lot of other teams that have things to share.
Well, thanks so much. What a great start. What a great start. Let's go next to Erie Public Schools. So a representative from Erie.
How you doing, Dr. Morris? This is Ken Nixon.
Hey, Ken.
How you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Real good, real good. Thank you, thank you. So I just wanted to kind of go over our slides real quick. So we are an urban school district, 10 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 3 high schools. So the grade levels are middle schools. So basically we're pre-K-5 elementary, 6-8 middle, and 9-12 high school. Roughly about 10 years at the building level. And right now we're really targeted on getting our last 3 schools universally trained for this upcoming school year. As far as our stars, big time are the leadership teaming. I know this DSFI work has helped us frame out a lot of our thought process around where we're at so far. But we do have 4 district facilitators that did have to get trained in through the PTAN and certified to be able to be designated facilitators for specific buildings. And then we do have support from the local intermediate unit 5. That they basically help support us with that higher level tier, our tier 1 implementing and our tier 2, sustaining and our tier 2 implementing schools. The DSFI training again has helped us big time frame this out. And then we have taken steps over the past 2 years already to put together a district-wide coaches team. So we meet with the coaches 3 to 4 times over the course of the year, and we do request a building administrator to be part of that work as well, so that administrator perspective is there along with the coach. Then our training is the next big star. Basically 13 out of our 16 buildings have been trained. That's universal. And then again, to go with our IU support, we have at least 2 to 3 trainings throughout the school year to keep everybody fresh and up to speed. And then again, we got the last 3 schools for universal coming up next year. Building wise, we do have 5 buildings that are at the higher tier level, and we just started this last year where we had one of our elementary schools, Perry Elementary, actually was like our model school, and we had one of our meetings with all the district coaches at that school, and they were able to share out, and then basically take us on a tour around the school and how, so people know exactly what, they could feel it, touch it, see it, exactly what PBIS should look like within their schools. And then as far as stairs, definitely the opportunity to evaluate our work, we're definitely looking at this document very seriously. It's been shared with our executive leadership team, and we're looking at how to take this document and align it in kind of a 3-year phase of implementation approach with the newer work that we're doing with realigning our student support systems. And then basically, this all came from DSI. I was really looking to bolster and create this really powerful district-wide leadership team where we're really focusing on individuals who are the ones in charge of other areas, so that we really can have a lot of really solid and exact decision making when it comes to our conversations. And then the stakeholder engagement, again, which we've learned through the DSFI, and making sure that we have buy-in and agreed upon objectives as we move forward. And then of course the alignment with those PBIS objectives and with support through the budget, and really making sure that the school district has taken the is definitely backing up PBIS and is definitely supporting the ongoing continual work of the district-wide project.
Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, you got great things to highlight in terms of the work that's being done. It's so clear that you guys identified we're not done yet. There's still room to grow. And what's neat, and I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, there's starting to be a theme that's been woven through, at least between our two districts that have shared thus far, about timing. When we heard from Blairsville-Saltsburg, we heard Dr. Anderson say, we want to give ourselves the permission to go slow. And then with Ken, he just said, we're looking at this as a multi-year phased in process. And you may not remember, but when we started our journey together way back in December, one of the things that I shared with you is that from our vantage point, with the work that we've been doing, we see that it's about a 10-year process from start to finish to really get to that level of, okay, we're not only sustaining the work, but now we're able to start innovating on the work. So it's so exciting to hear the teams that have shared thus far talk about timing and that it's not something that happens overnight. So thanks again to our districts that have shared so far. Let's go next to Keystone.
Hi, I'm Kelly Swartwood. I'm the new behavior specialist from Keystone Central School District, and we are a rural school district. We have 5 elementary schools, and we have 1 middle school, and then we have 1 high school that's a shared middle school, high school, and another high school as well. I had to phone a friend to ask Mrs. Moss when we began implementing, since I have been here since January. She said that the district began implementation in 2013 and certainly has waxed and waned as far as recognition is concerned over those years. Certainly this has been a more challenging year for teams to be able to meet with temperature checks and everything in the morning. So just that's really a big goal, is getting back to that piece of our teams being able to have dedicated team time. And getting back to that recognition process that certainly does motivate the school teams as well. So I think where our district is shining at is they are starting to come up with a consistent district level data collection system. They're trying to get all of their systems talking to each other. So their Ed Insight talking with having their universal screening data integrated within that Ed Insight component, and then having PowerSchool and all of their systems kind of an integrated data system. So we do have that multi-tiered system of support data piece. And then just looking at certainly how our teams then use that data to develop the interventions at each level is really what we're trying to work on. We do have our first meeting or meeting scheduled for our district-wide team to complete the assessment, to start looking at it district-wide. So we think that's definitely a star that's already on everyone's calendars. We already have folks who have accepted the meeting and are dedicated towards the implementation and continuation of building the tiers within our system. The piece that we are working on then, I think, is the next one, right? So just trying to look at building those tiered systems that sustain across district level changes. So if we have administrators that leave, we have a number of folks who are retiring this year. So just the continuation, since it has been in place since 2013, mixing it and varying it so that we all can continue and keep interventions in place. I think just continuing to build those systems of interventions across each tier is a big goal to start working on as well. And just also incorporating those folks who are at a higher level. I really got a lot from last session that we listened to, as far as just letting people know what is happening at all 3 tiers, so that when it comes to funding and resources, they see the importance of implementing PBIS.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for sharing. And we've got data coming next month when we do evaluation. So it's so exciting to hear that your team is already thinking about how do we integrate these data sources? How do we get things to talk to each other and kind of have a one-stop shop, so to speak, so we can make really great decisions. That's so cool to hear that that's a component of your thought processes. Let's go next to North Penn. We'll pop back.
Sorry, I was having a few tech
No, that's okay.
difficulties.
Yeah.
It wasn't turning on for me. I apologize. Okay.
No, you're totally fine.
So North Penn School District is a suburban school district. We have approximately 13,000 students total. We have 13 elementary schools, 3 middle or junior high schools, 1 high school, and we also have a former alternative school that is now actually a credit recovery school. The years implementing, we started with our first elementary school 4 years ago, but we have 10 elementary buildings that are all at varying stages of where they're at in implementation right now, with the intent to increase first across the remaining elementary buildings and then hopefully start moving more into the middle school level. Some stars, I would say, is district support prior to the pandemic. And hopefully, again, we had a lot of support from district administration in terms of just the time that to get things up and running. So in addition to consortium, they were very generous in providing half-day planning time once a month for all core team members so that there was that common time where everybody could work together since everyone's, before and after school schedules can get a little different. So that was a huge plus in terms of the district support. And our district level leadership, I would say, is also a star. We have our district level teams. We've really worked hard to get all key stakeholders involved. So in our quarterly meetings, we have cabinet members, we have school nutrition service director, the transportation director, our health and safety director is present. All the elementary principals that are participating currently. We have our community member, myself as district coach, as well as we have the curriculum and PD supervisor. So any of the needs that we need to talk about in terms of professional development, we can have those answers right there. I would say some stairs is policy. With the size of our district, it's very difficult sometimes to update or revise policies. And especially with the fact that we just have some of our district right now currently participating in PBIS. So it makes it difficult for us to change the district level policies sometimes to include and reflect more of the PBIS framework when we only have 10 of the elementary buildings that are really involved right now. So making sure that we're including that in our long-term planning is important, but I would say that's also probably the thing that we struggle with. And I think I might have forgotten this one. Oh no, I think this was, I didn't delete this one. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Like,
that's fine. That's my bad. Okay, so policy, great. And let's go back to that just so we've got a visual that best represents your district. Thank you so much, Christy, for sharing that experience with your district. And I think by this point in time, with all of this sharing, I'm really, really hopeful that all of you on the call today are starting to hear some things that kind of in your mind, you go, wait a minute, that's us too. We're struggling with that too. Or wow, we're getting ready to plan for that as well because we see that as a need. Or, hey, we're kind of doing this really well too, but you took a different approach to it. It'd be neat to kind of see how our two approaches connect or align. And maybe there's something we can learn from each other. And that really was the goal of doing these sessions at all, was to give you all the opportunity to kind of have a community of practice and a network. And so many things. I'm going to give a shout out to Becky Millspaw, who kind of prompted Tina and I to think about a structure like this for this session. And I think it's really worthwhile because it gives you guys the opportunity to really go, oh, we're not alone in this process. There are other people that are doing the same thing and trying to push the ball down the field a little bit farther. Last but not least, let's go to Upper Merion.
Hi. So I'm with Upper Merion Erie School District. I'm the school psychologist there, and I function as the district coach. We are a suburban school district. We have 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. We began implementing PBIS at 1 elementary school approximately 5 years ago. Maybe it was 6, but it's in that ballpark. And since then, we have introduced a staggered introduction installation across the district. And every year we bring on 1 to 2 more schools. And currently this year we are in installation at the high school, which is our last school to get involved. So we're really proud that, we've gotten all of, our schools on board and involved, including middle school and high school. It was an easy sell in elementary, but middle school and high school has been a little bit more difficult, but we're doing it. So I think that's pretty awesome. In terms of where our district shines, I think in the area of leadership teaming, we have an established leadership team across disciplines and stakeholders, and we do meet regularly. Sometimes I have to prompt for those meetings to happen, but they do. And we do have an established agenda at each meeting. I will say that after our last session with you, Kelsey, we have a new HR director that just started, and I really would like to get her involved. And I asked to invite her to our next leadership team meeting. Just to kind of introduce her to PBIS and what is it, to help kind of weave the idea of PBIS through the new hires and through her department, and just kind of, I love any opportunity to market PBIS to anybody that really holds any power, so to say, in the district. So I'd really like to kind of get her on board and kind of, include her. So that's a little goal that I took from our last session. So thank you. And, in terms of our teaming and our district support, we do get funding that we need that really isn't a concern. They're more than happy to assist us with this and to fund pretty much, what we're hoping to fund. And they do give us the resource of planning time, which is excellent. So that's generally been approved and not an issue for us to get in the summer. I think that we also excel in the area of policy, whereas PBIS was the foundation for us providing the structure around the health and wellness changes that needed to occur to bring students back to the district. And so when we were talking about bringing kids back and what was this going to look like, I really pushed that we need to teach this and do this through the framework of PBIS. So how are we and it all of a sudden gave PBIS, I think, some teeth to some non-believers almost, because it was a way to kind of show them, how are we going to take something that's imperative? That at that point was the most important thing. If you think about, Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, like health and safety, that was the most important thing that we needed to do, is to get kids back and have them safe. Well, how are we going to teach it and then reinforce that behavior? And so I really pushed that we do this through PBIS and through our PBIS lessons, and we created videos for the younger kids. And then we were systematically reinforcing the occurrence of all of those health and safety measures that we were putting in place and that we were teaching the kids. And then we used a lot of those data, like if kids weren't wearing their masks or they were getting too close, then we, did targeted lessons for those classes or those kids to really try to up and support that. And then of course we peppered them with, our reinforcement system to really show them how much it was acknowledged. So I think that helped to give some teeth to PBIS. It was just a different opportunity. So I think that was kind of a blessing. And then in terms of where we need to go, I see like alignment as a major area that we need to work on as a district. Our district likes to continually layer initiatives. Every year there seems to be a new initiative, a new kind of in vogue thing that they're trying to do. And it's layered on. And I think that staff have a very hard time incorporating or kind of aligning them. And I think that we, as we're layering these things on, need to basically align it for them. And, I challenge, our upper admin to give me any initiative that I can't filter through PBIS. Like I can filter it through, the framework, tell me what it is, and I can tell you how it would look at universal, secondary, and tertiary. And so I'm a strong proponent of any initiative. How do we kind of, weave it through PBIS to be able to not have this be as overwhelming, because staff hears it as this is another thing that we need to do. And then there's resistance. But if you can kind of show them how trauma-informed practices isn't really as different as PBIS, and this is really what it looks like, I think it makes it more palatable and more likely that they're going to feel confident that they can and are doing these things and can continue to do them, and that we're just not like burdening them with more and more initiatives.
Lauren, tweetable moments left and right, like somebody rings some bells. The fact that you used PBIS as the framework for bringing kids back to school in a safe and healthy way, and the fact that you're challenging your district uppers to help you see where can it not fit? How can we not align this? So thank you so much for sharing the work of your district and where you see opportunities for growth. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that you identified yourself. You said, I'm a school psychologist who functions as a coach. That is so what we're getting ready to talk about today, is how do we work with those responsibilities and those functions and not just titles. So I'm glad that you said that. It was such an opportune time to kind of add that into the mix. So thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
All right. So that was, it couldn't have gone better than I thought it would. You guys are doing so many amazing things. I hope that you hear commonalities among yourselves. And it's going to be really exciting when we get to the end of our journey together in June, and you guys have taken the DSFI and you have data to actually inform and guide your next steps. Let's kick off our time together today, our focus content, with a little activating of background knowledge. So here is the big graphic, all the drivers for implementation, everything that we would hope to be doing. And you can see here, there have been things that we've covered so far. So when we got to our session last month, session 5, we covered workforce capacity. So we finished those executive team functions all the way at the top. And you were encouraged to think about some takeaway tasks, locating information from your district related to hiring criteria, recruitment, selection processes, trying to dig into some of those things and identify, well, where are we expecting PBS experience and how are we expecting it to be implemented? So kind of looking into those job descriptions, if you will. We also started to dip our toe into those implementation functions, and we looked specifically at last session with training, examining your district's PD plan. It's really likely you're already offering professional development to give people the knowledge that they need to use skills for PBS, but how are you supporting that process? The other thing we mentioned last time that's going to be really relevant today is that training is an event. And all the things that you see on the screen here, this graphic organizer, each one of those boxes could be an individual training event. What we're going to talk about today and how we're going to start to connect the boxes is with coaching, because it's coaching that's going to connect the boxes. So before we dive into coaching, any lingering questions, wonderings, or points for clarification from last session talking about either workforce capacity or training? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and dive into coaching. And with coaching, we're still working at that level of implementation functions. So we've kind of set the scene, we've set the stage, we've got the logistics to do good work. Now we got to be at the business of doing the good work. So with coaching, we've got 8 different items that range from technical assistance, kind of establishing the fact that coaches are technical assistance providers, all the way to the actual coaches themselves, the implementation process. What do the coaches do? Differentiated coaching supports, because buildings are going to need different things at different points in time. Establishing coach networks, coaching functions, which we just talked about a few minutes earlier. Local coaching capacity. We'll highlight today that that is our goal. We want to get to the place where we have internal capacity to do this work and sustain the work. And then we'll round out this drive around coaching by understanding that we also have to pay attention to classrooms. So the way we've been doing this in our previous sessions together, I'll introduce the DSFI item and the featured name. We'll talk about possible data sources, scoring criteria. Our team here at the University of Missouri has dug into these to really identify how can we boil what could be a complex item into a main idea, kind of a takeaway statement that a team could hang their hat on as they start to assess and evaluate and make some determinations about their implementation status. We'll also propose some team assessment reflections. You know, if you were administering the DSFI, which you will soon, how could you use some of these reflective questions to really spark conversation and make sure that your team identifies the best score for consensus? And we'll always kind of pause throughout to make sure that we have some checkpoints for clarifications and just make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. And if you've got a wondering, we want to address it and get you the information you need before we move on. And throughout, both Lisa and I, we'll put on that hat of storyteller and we'll tell some stories from our districts that we work with to kind of showcase and highlight some examples and hopefully help you enrich your practice. So let's start with item 7.1, which is technical assistance. Now, I mentioned a few minutes earlier that we kind of adopt the mindset that coaches are technical assistance providers. And so with that, we're kind of here at item 7.1, we're laying that foundation. We're helping people understand that outside of a training, there's going to be support that's available for you. So with technical assistance, we're trying to get orientation materials. We want kind of that initial step where if it's an external stakeholder, it's informational. We're sharing this information either on our website, through a video, or maybe some mailers and informational sheets and pamphlets to help our external stakeholders really understand what are we doing and why are we doing it. So kind of the rationale and the process. But for our internal stakeholders, you know, faculty and staff, we really want to have some orientation events so that way they're getting started on the right foot. So the big takeaway with this item is that it's informational materials that are detailing the who, what, when, where, and why of PBIS implementation. We want those critical WH questions to be really articulated both internally and externally and available for all. And so think about the rationale. You know, what's our rationale for doing this? You know, what are we trying to do? What are we setting out to achieve? If you are getting ready to start this process, what are those readiness requirements, whether it be tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3? And then as you are benefiting from technical assistance, benefiting from coaching, what's the process? What can you expect? And what are the outcomes that we would hope to achieve? So as you're thinking about that for your district, you might consider, you know, let's take a closer look. Let's look in the mirror. Do we have a rationale? Do we even have this formalized as a statement to kind of put us all on the same page with the message that we want to share about why we're doing this? The same with the process. Do we all have a consistent message we're sharing about how we go about implementing PBIS and how it's connected back to the larger aims and goals of our district. And then I mentioned earlier kind of a differentiation between folks that are inside the district and folks that are outside the district, because they need different things. And so your goal with this one is to really identify that we've got materials for orienting all of our stakeholders and really answer those WH questions that I just hinted at a few minutes ago. So if 7.1 is kind of laying the groundwork that, hey, technical assistance is here, we're going to help you do this work well, well, then by the time we get to 7.2 and we're talking all about coaching, well, with coaching, we've got these specialized instructional support personnel, like it says there in the item feature. And I'm going to use Lauren as an example because she kind of volunteered herself as an example. She identified and said, I'm a school psychologist who functions as a coach. So she is somebody with specialized expertise. You know, you can see school psychologist right there in the parentheses. But we're looking for those people at both the school and the district level who have social, emotional, behavioral expertise that really aligns with what we're trying to do, implementing the framework across all 3 tiers, that full continuum. Now, I want to highlight some key points here, school and district level. We're going to showcase today, and we'll talk about it as we move through the items. You're going to have district coaches that support school coaches and school, so that way the school coaches can support the school teams. So you kind of think about it as this cascading model. You know, if I am a district coach, I may have 5 or 6 different schools that kind of I'm assigned to. I've got a cohort of schools, if you will, that I'm their go-to person for additional support. I'm their go-to person to answer clarifying questions or to help those school coaches better support their school teams. So with coaching here at 7.2, we're kind of taking that first step to go, do we have people in the district who we would say are specialists with that social, emotional, behavioral expertise across the continuum? So our main idea is that we want to have those people, that they do exist in our district and that they can connect data in systems and practices. There are going to be our go-to people for our school level coaches. So a quick check that we would offer would be kind of taking a step back and thinking, as a district, have we even identified individuals who will function in that capacity? So I'm going to use Lauren as an example again. A district could look at their kind of roster of all personnel and go, wait a minute, school psychologists trained with a very specific skill set and a high level of expertise. Okay, could we have those people with that skill set and expertise function as coaches? So kind of looking at who do we have, you know, how deep is our bench, if you will, and how can we use people in different capacities? Thinking about how do we even assess or identify who has expertise. And that's a throwback to our last session where I highlighted the trainer coach self-assessment. And we'll do that in just a few slides coming up. But you've got a tool through the National Center on PBIS connected to the professional development blueprint where you can actually assess and get some real data on the people we've identified. What do they actually know? What can they do? And then working to align those people with the needs of the school. So thinking about those quick checks and those reflective prompts, we also want to offer that, here's kind of that graphic that I tried to describe just a few minutes ago. I'm going to have my district PBS team, and with that comes some district level coaching that's going to benefit my school coaches. Then I'm going to have those school coaches that are benefiting the PBS team at that building level, as well as all the staff in that building. Because if I do a good enough job, I'm going to get to a place where my PBS team knows a thing about a thing and can benefit the rest of their staff. Say, if I'm a 3rd grade rep, I can support my third grade colleagues. Or if I am in the department rep for science at the high school level, I can support my other colleagues in my field as we work to benefit those students. And I mentioned that trainer coach self-assessment. We gave it to you last session as a resource. We'll be sure to do the same here at this session. We've got it set up as a Google Doc. So that way you can share it with people in your district. They could take that self-assessment. And then as a district leadership team, you'd be able to use that data to identify, okay, who are the people in our district with the expertise we need. 7.3 is about the implementation process. So I've got the concept of technical assistance established. Everybody's kind of been oriented. We've started to identify who's going to have the expertise that could function as a coach. And now with 7.3, we're talking about we need to have a process to actually use those people in the best ways. So we want a written process, something that's documented and formalized, so that way we're not just relying on somebody's good ideas from one season to the next. We've actually got a process here on how we teach all relevant staff how to implement things at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And this is a really important part, and how to request ongoing assistance. I mentioned earlier, training is an event, coaching connects the events. So from one training event to the other, if I didn't get something when I came to the PD session on Tuesday, I want to know, how do I request ongoing help for my building? Maybe we need that district coach to come and meet with the PBIS team, or sit down with the PBIS coach at that school level, or kind of do a quick little 15-minute in-service prior to a faculty meeting. What is the process that we've got for people to say, hey, I need a little bit more help? So the main idea that we've got with this one is that in order to sustain things at the school level, it's going to require ongoing systemic PD from the district to really impact that effective implementation. So this whole strand about coaching, I'm hoping you're starting to see how it's building on what we did last month with training. So we kind of know what we need people to understand. Now we've got to have the right people ready to support, ready to serve, so that way the things people learn at a training actually take hold and start getting applied. So we would offer a team to reflect on, what is the professional development that's been offered? What are we actually training people on? And who is providing that professional development? How was it delivered with Fidelity? And do the people that go to these events actually view them as helpful or not? So kind of collecting some data on that. And the goal is that by the end, we've really identified whether or not we have a written process that we use to teach everybody in the district how to do PBS well at each of those 3 tiers, and how to speak up when they need additional support and help. So that brings us to a quick check, a great pause point. We've kind of laid that foundation. And so feel free to ask any lingering questions, or speak to the fact of, what orientation materials have you provided? What do you have available? And as you start to look at coaching, how have you embedded coaching supports to, as I say, grow and glow your implementation? Lisa Powers, I know you're on the call today, and you're my colleague and my fellow storyteller. Lisa is one of our partners that is in the St. Louis metro area. And so Lisa, I know that you've got a district, I believe Ferguson-Florissant, that has taken some innovative approaches in this area, right?
Correct. Yes. I'm actually probably going to share 2 examples and kind of talk about how 2 different size districts did address these critical features, but in 2 different ways, what that looked like. So for the first piece is this is a smaller school district Normandy School District in St. Louis County, they started with creating the technical assistance by creating a playbook for their district. They wanted to really think about having some documented tools and processes that everyone would use across the district. And their playbook is online. You can Google it and find it. They really concentrated on tier 1, and then they scaled it up to tier 2. In addition to that, they thought about coaching as functions. They couldn't hire additional people.
If you wanted to.
So they use their coaches.
Can work on Canvas, sandbox.
Schools identified internally who would be their PBS coach for tier 1. They could self-select. For supporting tier 2 or planning their support for tier 2, they identified their counselors to take a leadership role. So they were counselors that would have a coaching function of supporting sort of tier 2 systems. Then when you think about their implementation processes, it is one of those things that they're continually working on and growing. They wanted to, instead of identifying a request for assistance, this is the 10-year plan, Kelsey, they're going to get there. What they did to start is said there will be someone from the district leadership team at each one of the tier 1 meetings. And we're there for support to start. And also it was a more challenging year. So they wanted to have that support in place up front. So that's an example of how one district did it. I can talk about Ferguson-Florissant on the next 3 pieces, if that, to save time a little bit.
That's super helpful. So Lisa, you were talking about Normandy, and Normandy developed their playbook. And I love that you shared that, anybody on today's session could just Google and find that playbook on their district website, correct?
Correct. I'll put the link in chat.
And then what we'll do is for anybody that was not able to get that link today for a variety of reasons, we'll make sure that we include it with the resources we share with Tina that she ultimately shares out with the recording of the session. Anyone else in terms of sharing the materials that you've developed or how you've started that journey of providing coaching supports?
I can speak a little bit to Interboro School District. I know I was asked last October, to be the district coach for Interboro School District. So I'm also the behavior manager for the community schools. So I'm at most schools anyway, except for the high school. And aligned with behavior, it kind of made sense for me to do both positions, which has been really nice. And I've started monthly meetings with all of the district coaches, so that way our systems are kind of aligned, but we can also network with each other to see what one school's doing, how that's working, and to share our resources. So that's been really helpful, having those monthly coaches meetings, and then those coaches go and have their own tier 1 meetings from that. So got a little off track with COVID, but our schools have been doing pretty good, and we've had 2 BOQs so far, both in the 90%, and have also started a virtual PBIS team, which has been really helpful for our sync and cyber kids.
Thanks so much for sharing the journey from Interboro, Gina. And I love that you talked about kind of the networks you've established, because it's a great segue into some of our future items here in this strand. So the check's in the mail. All right, let's take a look then at differentiated coaching support, because I mentioned a few minutes ago that not every school is going to need the same thing at the same time. And kind of going along with that request for assistance we just saw in the previous item, we're going to see differentiated coaching being a need that we have within our district. And so I've highlighted some key words here. We want to be able to say, okay, we know who our coaches are, the people that will function as a coach. Well, we want to pay attention to where is a building in terms of their phases of implementation. Are they kind of exploring tier 1? Are they getting ready to implement tier 1? Are they sustaining tier 1 and starting to explore tier 2? Everybody's going to be at a different part of the process. At the same time, we're going to be collecting data and encouraging buildings to collect data so that way we can use the data to say, you know what, it looks like we might want to focus on this specific element from the TFI. It looks like we may have some remediation or some growing and glowing work to do around behavioral definitions, for example, and a coach could move in and coach in that way. And so we want to be able to say, yes, we know that we're going to provide coaching, and we'll kind of have a scope and sequence of training events, but we also want to be able to have space to differentiate the supports that we provide based upon need. And so the main idea here is that we would have a tiered system of supports where we're paying attention to data, and that these tiered supports are available, accessible, and documented across the district. So we would encourage teams to consider, really, let's just start at the basics. To what extent are coaching supports being provided? Do we have coaches, but we're not using them? Okay, well, then that's one determination. How is coaching capacity determined? Have we kind of adopted that moniker of coach and we've given people the job title of coach, but we haven't set them up for success in terms of time, FTE, or just kind of the capacity to coach? And then once we've got our coaches functioning, how are we using data to determine what schools need? And then how are we documenting that whole process? So an example that we've created here at our team for the guidebook on district-wide implementation kind of uses that three-tiered model, much like what we would in terms of implementing PBIS at the building level. So in terms of universal support, everybody's going to get a green zone system. Everybody gets universal support. It's available to all of the buildings. It includes access to resources and materials posted on the website, training modules, district materials and handbooks and tools, etc. And I would say that that's kind of the best connection back to what Lisa highlighted earlier in terms of the playbook. What are we going to do for all, kind of the general curriculum, general programming? As we move up, some buildings will need some targeted supports. Those are going to be supplemental things we provide with the intent of kind of getting PBIS back on track. Maybe something's happened where, we had a changeover in administration, or, the PBIS coach in the building is on leave for a variety of reasons. And so we're going to be able to take our district coach and kind of get things back on track here, providing some targeted supports. And then we're going to have some buildings that need things that are really focused and providing intensive support, if you will, much kind of more individualized nature, where that building's having a specific issue that they're trying to remediate with implementation, something that really needs some problem solving in order to address and move forward. So you can kind of adopt that three-tiered model to help provide those differentiated coaching supports. 7.5, and this is a great connection to what Gina mentioned earlier with what she's kind of outlined and started establishing in Interborough, we've got district coach networks. So with district coach networks, we want to be able to kind of do what we said last session. If you think back to strand 6, we talked about training, and an element there was communities of practice. We wanted staff and faculty to really have access to a community of practice, to hear from other people that are in the classroom trying to do the same things. We see that similarly here with the district coach network. It's really beneficial for one district coach to talk to another district coach and share ideas. Likewise, it's really beneficial for one school coach to talk to another school coach and share ideas. And it helps really move everybody forward. So with what we're doing here at item 7.5 is we're saying we want to have some ongoing professional development for our coaches. So it's not enough for us just to say, okay, coach established, check. We want to set these people up for success. How are we teaching our district coaches to be really good quality coaches? How are we teaching our school level coaches to be really good quality coaches? And doing that builds and sustains internal capacity. As I mentioned a few slides back, we've got those people that are at the district level that benefit the people at the school level. We've got the people at the school level that benefit the whole team and the whole staff, so they in turn can benefit the students. So we would encourage a team to think about, with your coach network, what are you doing for your coaches? Do you provide professional development for people that you've identified will function as a coach? Do coaches get training? Do coaches get coaching even? To what extent does that PD cover all the tiers? Do coaches get everything from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3? Or right now, are we really just talking about how to coach at tier 1, that green zone? And if you kind of take PBIS skills, knowledge, expertise, and set it aside for a moment, there's a lot of behaviors and actions, and sometimes us on our teams, we call them moves. There's moves that coaches make to get one person or a group of people to move from good to great. There are kind of some reflective practices that are used. How do your coaches learn to be really good coaches? And so what we've proposed in taking a look at, school level, here's an example scope and sequence for school level coaches. So from August through April, there would be a different topic every month to help our school level coaches grow and glow their implementation. So at August, at the beginning of the year, we might start with some of the foundational elements, some of those basics about how do you have an efficient and effective team meeting, taking a look at the schedule for the meetings, the expectations or norms for the meetings, all the way to the minutes form or the agenda and action planning. So just for our school level coaches, some really good foundational components about running a good meeting. But by the time that you get to November and we're talking about fidelity of classroom implementation, we may talk about, okay, let's do some classroom walkthrough observations. How are you doing that in your building? What ideas can you share with others? We may talk about teacher self-assessments that teachers can take and how a school level coach could support a practitioner or a classroom teacher in that regard. By the end of the year, we're talking about using our data to action plan. So we may have a school level coach meeting where we talk about using TFI data. We talk about using self-assessment survey or SAS data. We talk about using student outcome data in terms of majors and minors and how we use that data to action plan effectively for the next year. So this would be an example scope and sequence for our school level coaches. 7.6 is about coaching functions. There's that word again, function, the function of a coach. And so I've highlighted on the screen because I think it's really imperative for this item. We're talking about responsibilities and activities, not people or positions. Because sometimes we get caught up on what somebody's title is, and the title doesn't make us think coach. However, the things they do within their job description on a day in, day out basis, their actual responsibilities and activities are really great coaching functions. So we want to be clever. We want to, be inquisitive and curious about how do we have the right people serving as coaches and working that function. So with our coaching roles, we want to understand if you're a coach, you're a professional developer. You're developing all the professionals in our district. So there's some functions that you're going to use, some responsibilities and activities and moves you'll take to help people as you provide technical assistance. So it's beneficial to think about, you can see there at a score for 2, outlining the coaching functions for implementation. So we've mentioned earlier, you've got district coaches, you've got school level coaches. So how do we kind of create that differentiation? What do we know if you're going to serve as a district coach and function as a district coach? Here are the things that you'll do, things that you'll be expected to engage in versus what would we expect a school coach to do? How would we expect a school coach to function? Now, the things that you see here in this really simple 2-column chart all come from the National Center on PBIS, the Professional Development Blueprint. They do a really great job of outlining things we would expect of a district coach versus things we would expect of a school coach. Now, for a lot of our districts that we support here in Missouri, our model demo districts, we would also have a third column, kind of the external coach. So when I go into one of my districts, it's really helpful for all of us to be on the same page about here are the things that Kelsey or Danielle or a member of the University of Missouri team, these are the things they're going to do and how those things are different than the things that an internal district coach would do and how those things are different than a school level coach. So kind of thinking across who are the coaches and what will they do? Because at a district level, we're looking for personnel that have behavioral and PBIS expertise, but they don't have teaching or administrative duties within a school. So who are those people that aren't assigned to a classroom or specifically assigned to administration, and they've got that expertise? How could you leverage those people to serve in that function of district coach? For our school coaches, well, we do want somebody to be school-based, but we don't want them to have those responsibilities of a classroom teacher because that's a major responsibility, being a classroom teacher. And that person's not going to have the flexibility to do some of these coaching functions and act in that way. And we want these people to receive additional training. Now, personally, I'm being a storyteller again. I remember when I was a classroom teacher and our district was starting to adopt PBIS, and I go to the kind of mid-July in-service district-wide professional development where they're rolling out the PBIS red carpet, and this is many moons ago. And I get up to go to the restroom. I come back and my table goes, "We identified you'll be the coach next year." And I'm thinking, I'm a second-year teacher and no one knows what this thing is just yet. And I'm going to have my own classroom of 25 every day, all day. How can I serve as a coach? And coaches never got additional training on being coaches. So you have to think about who are these people that have the time, have the experience and skill set to do this work solidly at the building level. And so offering some team assessments and quick checks in that regard. Because the goal is that you've got a process that really outlines who is going to do what. So that brings us to a good checkpoint, kind of checking in on wonderings and clarification points, lingering questions related to establishing those coaches.
Kelsey, this is Lisa. Just one thing that's going through chat. Unfortunately, I think the district changed access to the playbook. So I will take screenshots and include them in your resources that you share back. If that would be of help.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lisa, for doing that for these wonderful people.
Hi, Kelsey, this is Becky Millsbaugh. Can I ask a quick question?
Please do.
Okay, I apologize. I was in another meeting, but I was listening. Just don't tell the other meeting. When you're talking about school coaches, oftentimes our school districts will use different coaches, possibly for tier 1 and for advanced tiers. So when we're looking at tier 1, because oftentimes our schools are smaller and there isn't a lot of people to carry the load, we may have school internal coaches for tier 1 actually serve more as a general education position or a tier 1. Is your thought process to not do that?
That's a great question. And I appreciate you speaking up, Becky, and asking it because it's a real question. A lot of the districts that we have across the country, whether you're small or large, resources are limited. So we have to figure out how do we do great work with what we've got. I think it's absolutely possible to have a school-based person with teaching responsibilities to serve as the coach. It's possible. We can do it if we're really clever about how we go about doing it. Because you see in the column for school coach, can a classroom teacher be a resource for the school team during the PBIS meeting? Absolutely. You could have a classroom teacher that people could look to when we've got a PBIS team meeting. And, Kelsey, what do you think about that? Or Becky, what should we do? That's absolutely possible. Is it possible for the teacher to be a point person between the school team and the district coach, especially when it's time to request assistance? Yes. And it's possible for this person to provide leadership within the school and assist with problem solving. We've got lots of savvy teachers that are great at managing time, and they have leadership aspirations, and this is a great lane for them to be in. I would propose that the caveat to that is we've got to help achieve a semblance of balance. If we're going to be adding things to somebody's plate, how can we take something off, or how can we alleviate? Or with the district one of the districts that I work with, is it possible to provide a stipend? So we're actually compensating this person for things that they're doing above and beyond their general education duties. Becky, does that kind of speak to your question?
That makes total sense. I appreciate the clarification.
I appreciate you asking.
Kelsey,
Other question, Lisa, yeah.
just a connection to Becky's question. I appreciate that, because many districts have to problem solve and think this through. So one of the districts we work in identified every teacher serves on a committee that's part of teacher responsibilities. And so their committee, if they were going to co-facilitate or co-coach a tier 1 team, that would count as their committee. So that was another unique way in which they addressed being careful of teachers' time.
A lot of districts or even buildings will look at that role of school coach and think, okay, I've got an assistant principal, or I've got an administrative intern, or I have a teacher leader with true leadership aspirations. Those people are great to serve in that capacity as coach. At the same time, one of my districts for an elementary building, it's the kindergarten teacher. She just has that charisma and that pizzazz. She's well respected in the building, and she likes doing it. She likes the balance. So it's all about being curious with the process and finding people who could do the job well.
Hey, Kelsey, I put in the chat for everybody on the PBIS website, a group of local facilitators along with several patent people got together and updated our coaches materials. And so as district coaches, if you wanted to grow more of your coaches at the building level, those materials are linked, but you can also just go under Coaches Corner on the PBIS website. So
awesome, Tina. Thanks for popping that through the chat. In the interest of time, we're going to jump to our final 2 items. We're going to talk about local coaching capacity here, item 7.7. We've talked from day one that the goal here is sustainable implementation, getting to a place where you have the capacity in your district to do PBIS district-wide, to drive PBIS district-wide, and to innovate on what you're doing, that you're not reliant on outside people to do it and to keep it going. And so we want to talk here at 7.7 on local coaching capacity. And so what we're trying to do here at 7.7 is say, okay, we've transitioned from somebody coming in to coach. And in our state of Missouri, that was the model for a long, long time. And it was really reliant on kind of a regional center providing all of the training for a district, providing all of the coaching at the building level. And it was contracted work, really. And what we're trying to get to is saying, okay, that has a space in place. And yes, at times we may take advantage of that if needed. But really what we want to do, the ultimate goal, we have our own in-house capacity. We have local capacity to do what we need to do. So we have identified a core group. We have a core group, a cadre, a go-to A-team varsity group of trainers that are identified to help us lead the work, and we've got it embedded into their job descriptions. So the big takeaway here is that we do have that group of individuals that are employed here. They know our district, they know our systems and processes and what we do and who we are, and they're tasked with providing those coaching supports to schools. So thinking about this at the team level, really taking stock, who is providing coaching support to schools? You know, the reality is there's likely coaching going on in your district. Let's figure out who's doing it. Is it an internal group? Is it an external group? And then if we're thinking about the coaching responsibilities, how do we get those embedded into our job descriptions for those individuals? So I'm going to kind of throw back. Lauren mentioned earlier, you know, a goal that they have in her district is to start involving this new HR director a little bit more, somebody who's got the influence that we want when it gets to workforce capacity. Because one of the things we talked about last month was the power of a job description, making sure that we're outlining those functions within the job description for a specific individual or employment role in our district. So that way we for sure have the time set aside for somebody to do coaching well. And our last question that we'll take a look at this session is classroom implementation. So with this item, we're kind of acknowledging that students are going to spend the majority of their day in a classroom. So we're only going to get so far if we don't pay attention to classrooms. We got to look at classrooms. How are we implementing with Fidelity? Are we implementing with Fidelity? What's the quality of our classroom implementation? And I want to be really careful here and explicit to say what we're not doing is creating the PBIS police. I know a lot of districts, as soon as we start talking about going to classrooms, people start to kind of bristle and take a step back and go, wait a minute, I don't know that I'm totally comfortable with somebody coming in from the district level, walking through my classroom, taking some notes and kind of assessing what I'm doing. How's this going to be used? Well, the reality is, if we don't collect that type of information, if we don't collect that type of data, then we don't know how to best support our classroom teachers. So it's not a gotcha mentality, it's a support mentality. And that's the big message here at this strand. How do we create coaching supports? If kids are truly going to spend the majority of their time in a classroom, we got to make sure that classroom teachers are set up for success, because that's how we're going to sustain implementation. So we would offer the team, the district leadership team, to think about, have we set an expectation for implementing at the classroom level? Because if we haven't set that expectation that PBIS is done at the classroom level, then we can't go through classrooms and look at how people are doing because we haven't set them up for that expectation. We also want to think about, what is our expectation from the district for collecting classroom level data? And I hope that you can hear me when I say we're not at the place of collecting student outcome data per classroom. I'm not looking, okay, in Lisa Power's classroom, how many majors has she written this year? How many minors has she written? How many students have received a major or minor? We're not looking at that type of data. We're looking at data in terms of, okay, how's Lisa doing with opportunities to respond? How's Lisa doing with behavior-specific praise? How's Lisa doing with setting expectations? Because if we can go classroom to classroom and collect that type of data, then we can kind of get a building level composite. And then it makes the job of a school coach or even a district coach that much more effective to say, it looks like our classrooms are great with setting and establishing expectations, routines, and procedures, but we may need some additional support when it comes to behavior-specific praise. So we want to think through the process. What data are we going to collect? Who's going to collect it? When's it going to be collected? And how would it even be used? In the district, one of the districts that I work with, their district leadership team took this item and said, well, you know what? We can't collect it if we don't all collect it the same way. So the district leadership team made it a priority for them to create a tier 1 district-wide tool for ongoing monitoring of just what we would call effective practices for teaching and learning. So taking into consideration ratio of interactions, do we have positives to correctives in the right balance? Opportunities to respond, individual versus whole group. Are we using prompts and pre-corrects effectively? And so looking at some of the things that are evidenced in the literature are oftentimes fundamental elements of classroom management, professional development we might offer at the district level. And at the end of the day, we're talking about class-wide PBIS is really what this is, but using a district standard process where the school coach could just do some really quick observations in classrooms and collect some frequency data to really understand how is this building doing with translating school-wide PBS to the classroom level. And so I'll provide or will provide this tool from one of our districts in the resources that we share out with this strand. So we've covered all of our items. Let's go ahead and we'll kind of wrap it up real quick with a quick check and just kind of touch point on any lingering questions we might have before we look at what's coming up next month. Y'all can't see it, but I got a clock on my side of the screen and I'm watching and I'm using that good teacher brain of, okay, 7 seconds of wait time, 7 seconds of wait time. Making sure everybody's got a chance to unmute themselves, ask any questions. Hearing none. So resources we'll share with you. We'll share that classroom walkthrough tool, that sample that I just shared. We'll share, again, the link to the trainer coach self-assessment, as well as the PD blueprint. Lisa's going to help us out and get some screenshots or a copy of the playbook that she mentioned earlier from Normandy, and we'll share that as well. So that way you've got resources as you move forward with this strand on coaching. Coming up next, we're going to come back together on Thursday, May 20th, 1 o'clock to 2:30. We're going to look at strand 8, evaluation. This is the largest strand in the DSFI. And so we will likely kind of just get right into it next month. And Tina, I think you've got somebody from Pennsylvania that's also going to talk about some of the really innovative, great things that PBS is doing.
We may be talking to, we have in May, Tim Runge, who is doing something that is a data story. It's not going to be part of this, but it's a separate offering.
Got it. Got it. Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you. Between now and then, what would Lisa and I encourage you to do? Well, as you're reflecting on today's content about coaching, see if you can identify what are the orientation materials we have. You know, what's the information we're sharing with our external stakeholders about why we're doing this and what we're doing versus the orientation events that we would have for our internal stakeholders. Explore the ongoing support that you're offering between training events, because we talk about training as an event, coaching connects the event. So what are you doing from one event to another to really help people develop acquisition of those skills and move those skills from acquisition to fluency, to maintenance, to generalization, all of those great things. Examine in your district who can function as a district coach or as a school coach, and explore the ongoing support that you're providing those people. What are you doing to set your coaches up for success? And last but not least, examine how you're assessing classroom level implementation. How are you keeping your fingers on the pulse of whether or not you're implementing with Fidelity at the classroom level? Because like we talked about, that's where students are going to be the majority of the day. So with that being said, any final questions and answers for either Lisa or myself?
Kelsey, can I ask you one more question?
Please do.
Have you ever worked with a team? I get a little concerned when we go into other people's classrooms for exactly the same reason that you just talked about. But has there been any evidence, or have you seen any where the school themselves, the teachers, come up with what they think are real strong tier 1 classroom practices, and that's where the walkthrough comes from, as opposed to being given to them in a more official form that looks very much like evaluation?
That's a great point, because we, like we said earlier, we don't want people to perceive this as the PBIS police. We don't want people to feel like this is evaluative in any way, shape, or form. So I think you can do what you described. You can have classroom teachers generate what would be the things. At the same time, just kind of plain devil's advocate, you run the risk of people choosing and selecting things that aren't evidence-based practices. And so we do want to always make sure that what we're keeping track on are those effective practices for teaching and learning. Now, that being said, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for listening sessions where, if you've got a district kind of initiative on this process, the district coaches bring in that school coaching network. So here we're back to our networks again. And we start the sharing of this process with our school level coaches and get feedback from them about how to refine it. Because what we did in the district I work with is we went through several cycles of revision and, okay, here's what we think. Let's share this out and get feedback. Okay, we took this in. Let's share it out and get feedback again. And the teachers were involved at every step of the process. So by the end, with the final form, it was so teacher informed and teacher driven. So that way teachers knew, okay, my building coach is going to come through at some point and they're going to take a look at some things that I had input on and that I advocated for. The other part that I think goes along with this is really teaching people, what are we even going to do with this data? Because it's really important to help people know it's going to be anonymous. We're not looking at what you're doing in your own classroom and only talking about you. And at the same time, it's not going, what we take from your classroom will never be shared with the person who's filling out your job performance evaluation. It's really for us to say, okay, how can we generate a building-wide composite of stars and stairs, much like what we started with today's session. Here are the things that we're doing really well when it comes to class-wide PBIS. Let's celebrate each other. Here are the things that, based upon data across the building, we might take as a professional development focus for the next year. And so I think that's another helpful way I've seen buildings get at what you're describing. Lisa, what would you offer from your experience with your districts?
I think you did an excellent job talking about the voice. The other piece is de-identified. When people learn to trust that my teacher name might not be on it, but we're actually going to learn with and from each other, looking at our school-wide data, and then I can individually look at my data. That helps build trust in the system as well.
And I love what you just said, Lisa. It's de-identified, but I still get to see my data. You're going to give it back to me. I can use it for my own personal reflection, and I can look at that, and then I've got the opportunity as a professional to request additional assistance. That's also a major part that we've seen from our districts. Becky, does that speak to your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tina for any closing remarks